Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. Of course, this is Rickford Burke in New York. If you're seeing me, text me, let me know. Good afternoon. Keep sharing the link, everybody. Share this link. Wherever you're watching from, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in, I have a little technical difficulty here, so that's why I'm looking at my little screen. Okay, I can see that you're seeing me. Share the link, everybody. You know our topic today. I have the opposition leader here. After his interview with me, we'll do analysis with Member of Parliament Amanza Walton Desir, attorney at law, and Darren Wade, attorney at law. Share the link to everybody. Let's get a couple thousand people here very quickly. Good afternoon. If you are in New York, if you're in Europe, good morning. If you're in Africa, good morning. If you're in Asia, good morning. If you're in Guyana, good afternoon. And the rest of the Caribbean, good afternoon. Text me, let me know where you're watching from. Share the link. I'll be back in 60 seconds. All right, good afternoon again. Welcome to Conversation with Rickford Burke. We're in New York. I'll be talking with the opposition leader shortly. Keep sharing the link. I can see that you're doing that. But like I said to you guys yesterday, Guyanese demonstrate too much disinterest, too much apathy. You guys are in a malaise. So we have to wake you guys up. Your country is for sale and you guys are sleeping. You're going to skank concerts. You're going to Patriot Robert. Wake up. So I'm going to give you another opportunity. Share this link. I'm only seeing 3,000 people here. We have the opposition leader of Guyana here in New York who will be joining me. Share the link. Let's get 12,000 people here. So I'll do like what I did yesterday. And you guys share the link. And each one of you share the link to 20 other people. All right. So let's see who can achieve the most shares. Share the link. Everybody get into all your Guyanese groups. Share the link in your email. Share the link on WhatsApp. Share the link on Instagram, on Facebook, Facebook Messenger, wherever. Just share the link. I'll be back in 60 seconds. All right. Good afternoon to you. Welcome, Mr. Aubrey Norton, to New York. Welcome to Conversations with Rickford Burke. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Keep sharing the link, everyone. We'll go straight to the interview with Mr. Norton. Mr. Norton, good afternoon. How was your visit to New York so far?
Extremely good,
Extremely good.
including getting some rest.
Including getting some rest. Thanks.
This year I didn't get it.
You might have to project your voice a little, because
Okay.
good. So let's get straight to the topic at hand. The Vice News interview has come out. There's confirmation based on videotape evidence that Mr. Jagdeo did, in fact, make arrangements with journalists posing as investors to meet them at his house, allegedly, based on what Vice News is saying, to discuss investment and an alleged bribe. That's exactly what Vice News has alleged. And Mr. Jagdeo had previously told the nation that he did not know Sue beyond pleasantries. And we saw in the video that Sue was there as the middleman. And he did say in the video, when they were asking him how to pay the bribe, talk to Sue. You have called for Mr. Jagdeo to resign. Why?
Well, first of all, Guyana, as you're aware, is now an oil producing country. One of the worst things that can happen to an oil producing country is for its leadership to be accused of corruption, because when you have oil resources and you have corruption, the people tend not to benefit. That's the first point I want. The second point I want to make is that here's a public officer, a senior politician in Guyana, who should be operating from his or her office when it comes to something like we have heard in the Vice media, in the Vice News report. And when you see one is operating from their home
In a dark room.
and in a very secluded, what appears to be a dark corner, then it raises questions as to why this meeting is outside of the normal government offices, etc. So that raised question. Then one has to recognize that there's a long history of allegations of corruption against Bharrat. And since all of those allegations have been made continuously and continually over the years, one wonders if one can let something like this pass. And I think we cannot. And so we have got to deal with it, because it is setting a bad example in Guyana. And it is portraying Guyana in a bad light. And so it is my view that he needs to resign, because there are allegations against you, and the kind of power he wields, you cannot have a proper investigation with him wielding that power, because almost immediately it will instill fear and people will be compromised. So I think the logical sequel of the circumstance is to ask for his resignation. If he doesn't do the decent thing and resign, in the earlier statement, it was made clear that we believe the president should remove him from office. Failure of the president to remove him from office will portray the president as complicit in the alleged crimes, and therefore will further place the government into that darker corner.
Don't you think that the president has been complicit? Because when the young lady, Miss Isabel Young, initially, well, when Mr. Jagdeo released the interview with Isabel Young, the president came out and said she doesn't have any evidence and she's just accusing the vice president to tarnish his image. But we knew that these North American or Western news agencies don't operate like that. And Jagdeo had to have known that he was videotaped at his home, unless he didn't realize that these were journalists. So Irfan Ali knew, the members of the cabinet who were defending Jagdeo knew that Jagdeo was allegedly collecting bribes and meeting with investors. Two questions. Isn't that indication that the entire cabinet is probably complicit or involved in taking bribes? And two, what does it say for the vice president to be, for Bharrat Jagdeo as vice president, to be involved in investments, meeting with investors when there's a legal entity called Go Invest responsible for that kind of investment and processing applications and all that? What is his responsibility under the law to liaise with that agency? Or if you're aware, is he the subject minister? Because as far as I'm concerned, he's not aware, he's not the subject minister. So he is usurping the responsibility of the legal entity. And that's where the problem is in the first place. He is everything. He's the president, minister of investment, minister of foreign affairs, minister of everything. And he's cutting deals at his home.
Well, first of all, let's give the president, the cabinet, the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they didn't know it was coming. It has now come. And therefore, they can't argue now that they don't know.
Or they don't have evidence.
And the evidence is before them. And so it is in that context they should act or be considered to be complicit in the activities. The next point I want to make is this. If you understand the nature of Jagdeo and his approach, you will recognize that he is all about dominance and control. Nobody else must have a say. And therefore, for him, they got nothing to do with portfolio. He's jack of all trades. He's minister of everything.
He's the government. He's the whole government.
And even in some of the comments you see from some supporters of the PPP, I remember reading one comment in which the person said, the president needs to be careful because it's Jagdeo made him. So there are all of those factors that are operating. But what is critical here is Guyana. And if we make Guyana critical, then it becomes a question of what needs to be done first to protect the image of Guyana, and secondly, to ensure the law take its course. What is critical here is for there to be an impartial investigation and the law takes its course. I said in the statement we made this morning, if we continue to allow this approach in which the vice president can operate as Lord and God and accountable to no one, then we are inviting Dutch disease because the level of corruption will increase. Now, the big dilemma is that they have compromised the Guyana police force. They have compromised the judicial system. And therefore, the question becomes, how does the law take its course? In my sincere view, you have to find credible investigators. We might have to look outside of Guyana.
The FBI? The FBI should.
I don't want to specify which agency, but I think that there should be a credible investigation team assembled. And it is important that Jagdeo resigns or not be in the position because he can affect an investigation once he's wielding power. So I would like to see a credible investigating team put together. I also believe that there has to be a number of actions in terms of engaging the international community, sensitizing the people of Guyana to not what only happened, but also to explain to them the consequences that will flow from what would have happened. And failure to act will place Guyana firmly on the path towards uncontrolled corruption. We know there is already corruption. But if with this kind of exposure, there is no action, it's like a license for corruption at every level. It is generally said, when the head spoils, the entire body
Fish rots from the head.
goes. And so once the head spoils, and in this case, we're talking about the literal head, not the apparent head or the de jure head, the entire body will spoil. We also are hearing that there are a lot of conflict within the PPP in terms of access to resources to be able to benefit from the oil and gas sector. And once that becomes the case, it becomes more important that this matter be dealt with and that the law takes its course, and all and sundry involved should be made to face a legal tribunal, however we describe it.
We, CGID, wrote the members of Congress yesterday asking for them to have the Justice Department examine whether or not any bribe was paid to any American companies, because under the U.S. Foreign Practices Corruption Act, I don't think I call that, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Nationals from around the world can be prosecuted in the U.S. if they paid bribes to a U.S. company or U.S. official. Do you think the U.S. Justice Department should now get involved in investigating whether or not any Americans, citizen or companies paid Mr. Jagdeo or anybody else in the PP government any bribe?
The U.S. will have their interests, and I think they should pursue their interests. There are cases where their interests will help us, and we welcome it. But in essence, my view is that this is a Guyana problem. It has international dimensions, but it must be dealt with and ensure the people of Guyana are satisfied that it was not only dealt with, but that it turns the country in the direction of being anti-corruption. At present, Guyana seems to be at the government level pro-corruption. Corruption has become interwoven into the fabric of the modus operandi of the society. Endemic. It's endemic. And if one doesn't end that, then one is placing Guyana on a very, very destructive path. And that is my worry. If one adds to that, that Guyana is returning to become a state that is linked to drugs and drug trafficking, you can see where it is going to go. The absence of rule of law, drugs and drug trafficking, corruption, that combination clearly is a recipe for the destruction of Guyana and the continuation of poverty across the society. With oil resources, we have got to prepare the conditions for the people of Guyana to benefit. With activities like this, the people of Guyana can benefit. It is Jagdeo, the PPP, with friends and family that will benefit, and that will not do us good. In that regard, we believe that all actions that are necessary to ensure the perpetrators of these kinds of activities are brought to justice, because it is only if you have a system in which people believe that if they commit offenses, they will be prosecuted. Then and only then there will be some amount of deterrence. And so if we continue along this path, like I've said before, the government will be issuing a license for people to be corrupt and rob this society of its resources. Every day that you wake up, the government is announcing somebody coming to do hotels, coming to do this. If there isn't a legal framework within which this operates, the lawlessness will continue and Guyana will suffer, including future generations, who we should be focusing on putting in place a legal framework to allow us to exploit our resources, develop our society, while at the same time creating conditions for future generations to benefit from our resources and continue along a path of producing a society in which people are law-abiding and all Guyanese feel part and parcel. In addition, if one accepts that this is being done with foreigners, then it is sending the wrong signal to the people of Guyana, as well as to the international community, because people henceforth will conclude, I don't want all them go invest in all that nonsense I talked about. Based on these allegations, there's a man we can talk to, and once we talk to the man, we in Google. I got a friend that said, Guyana is Google, anything happens. So I think we have to look at it in the much wider framework, with a much wider picture that is important. Guyana has to take its resources and put it into development so the people can benefit. Any act or acts that are aimed at promoting the interests of a few, especially in a corrupt and illegal way, should be condemned and brought to an end.
Okay, guys, share the link, everybody. I'm talking with the opposition leader of Guyana, Mr. Aubrey Norton, here in New York. Keep sharing the link, everybody. All of you share the link to 20 people. You agreed to do that earlier. Two questions as a follow-up as we wrap up this segment. Do you have confidence that Jagdeo will resign, or Ali would fire him, or that there will be an investigation? I noticed the U.S. Embassy put out a statement today, falling short of calling for an investigation, just saying accountability is necessary in this society. I just think that's inadequate. I'm not going to ask you to comment on the U.S. statement, but the U.S. Embassy always seemed to act in favor of the government rather than act in the interest of democracy, as it claims, and rule of law. That's just my statement. So my question is, do you think, or do you have any confidence that there will be an investigation and that Mr. Jagdeo would leave office either by resignation or being fired by the president?
First of all, when there are these levels of allegation against you, the tendency will be for Mr. Jagdeo to feel he needs to be there to protect himself. So I'm seeing no hope that he will resign. And then if you accept that it is a government that knows about corruption, is part of a corruption, then there might be the tendency of the government to protect him, because to lose him is to open the floodgates of anti-corruption activity. Then the institutions that should really be pursuing this in an impartial way are all compromised. And therefore, in my opinion, there is little hope that what should happen in a democracy would happen. The evidence is clear that Guyana is not a democratic society. Guyana is a society that is lawless, that is non-accountable, that is not transparent. And so you are dealing with an authoritarian, autocratic type society, utilizing democratic values. No such values exist in Guyana. In fact, if you look at the government's approach, you will recognize they have no interest in democracy. First, Parliament has approved a procurement commission. The government isn't swearing it in and implementing it. And the only reason that could be is because they do not want oversight. Second, the government went to Parliament and changed the quorum for the Public Accounts Committee so that it can dominate and control it. What that signals is that even after they finish spending, they don't want to account. And so they are muzzling the Public Accounts Committee. And if you now accept that the government violated the law in appointing a commissioner of police, it means almost automatically that that commissioner of police is not an independent actor. It's an actor who is there at the whims and fancies of the government. And therefore, the likelihood of the police force acting as the legitimate law enforcement agency in Guyana that can operate based on the law is little or non-existent. And so you're facing a real dilemma in terms of where this will go. And that is why I believe we have to move to the stage of public meetings, meeting people, educating them, and prepare the basis to be able to challenge the excesses of the government. One cannot not recognize that this government is a runaway train on the rails to lawlessness and dictatorship. And therefore, one has to do the things that are needed to put it in check, while at the same time not allowing the PPP the opportunity to use whatever action you take to use for their narrow political gains. I can say to you, one of the things they are hoping, and we're cognizant of it and will deal with it, is that they get the kind of protests that permit them to penetrate it and then do what they did historically, beat Indo-Guyanese, and then say it is the protesters. We are cognizant of their plan, and we are going to organize our political action and protest in a way that removes from them that possibility. Because let me say this to you. At present, the society, regardless of ethnicity, is up against the PPP. Of course, like in any polity, they're going to be the hardcore PPP, no matter what. They're going to bury their head in the sand. But I'm moving around Guyana, and as you move around Guyana, you are hearing from people their resentment to the people. We therefore have got to manage it in such a way that the PPP doesn't use it, including their PR machinery, to generate a racial and ethnic conflict so that they can use it as a rallying point. So in essence, what I'm saying to you, we have to be strategic, focus, structured, take on the PPP, expose what is happening, make the links between Jagdeo and the entire political party, and educate Guyana and influence them in a particular direction. That is where I think we need to.
Okay. I want to follow up on something you said in terms of the police. It is obvious to even a layman the police commissioner was unconstitutionally appointed. The constitution calls for significant, substantial consultation with the opposition leader. That was not done. I'm not sure if the the coalition has filed an action in court.
Yes, we did.
Okay, you did. But let me ask you this. We're talking to probably approximately 13,000 people in Guyana and abroad. What action should the people of Guyana pursue if this government refuses to remove Bharrat Jagdeo and refuse to have an investigation into his corruption?
First of all, let me see on the question of the commissioner, the issue is not solely consultation. The issue is that in law, even if you're appointing somebody to act, the law stipulates that you have to appoint the most senior person. And the most senior person is Paul Williams. Clearly, in the normal discriminatory mode, they didn't do that. So now, I indicated to you, first of all, we need to educate. We're putting out a lot of information there on what is happening. Secondly, you have to meet with other interest groups. You got to be careful that this doesn't turn out to be a battle between the APNU, AFC, and the PPP. You want to mobilize broad-based support because this is a matter that transcends political partisanship. Once you can build that coalition across the board, then we can take the parliamentary approach, but also extra parliamentary approaches that allow us to achieve our strategic objectives without jeopardizing the wider interests of that.
Okay. Let's move on to another topic. You're in the diaspora currently. The Minister of Home Affairs just recently threatened essentially people who criticize the government from the diaspora will be arrested when they go to Guyana. He not only said that at a meeting, but then he came outside and said the government intends to hold these people at a place until the matter is resolved. In other words, the government of Guyana is planning to kidnap United States citizens or United States residents or residents and citizens of foreign countries. What's your position on that?
First of all, I would see it in the wider context of the PPP being a repressive government. They're attempting to ensure people don't enjoy their right. First of all, you have a right to free expression. You have a right to free expression. And if you express the view, whether you're in the United States or Guyana, once it doesn't violate the law, you should not be harassed. That's the first point. The second point I want to make is this. With all the noise they are making, I don't think they will arrest American citizens because they know the danger that that portends. And so I don't anticipate they will do it with American citizens. What they might do is if they recognize the person just have a green card or was a visitor here, they will seek to harass them. Now, the legal system in Guyana will have to be utilized to challenge whatever they do. And political protests, etc., will also have to be utilized to challenge what they are doing. We also will have to expose them internationally because, in essence, what they're seeking to do is to create a police state, and we have to resent them. We have condemned their position, saying that it is unacceptable in a society that claims to be democratic. And then what about those PPP people who are saying worse things than that, but there is no mention of arresting them? There's no, I don't believe any side should be arrested. But let's assume for the sake of argument, you are arresting people who talk against the government. What about those who talk for the government in a very abusive way and a lot of times in violation of law? So I think these are issues that will have to be addressed. But my honest view is that I don't think the government is going to run down the road of trying to arrest American citizens.
Well, and I'm segueing to Congressman Jeffries. We've discussed this matter with members of Congress, and not only members of Congress, political activists, our local elected officials, and Black Lives Matter and some other organizations are saying if they do that, then they're making a list of other persons from Guyana connected to the government at embassies, at consulates and so on, that they will target for protests and other action as well. Do you think that kind of action should be pursued?
Yeah, but I think it's a wider issue. I've listened to the vice president, the second vice president, going on like a little child on television about Hakeem Jeffries. First of all, as a former president, he would know that the American system will have mechanisms to know what is going on in Guyana. And therefore, for him to say he is misinformed assumes that the congressman is getting information only from the little circle that he talks about in Guyana. He missed totally that the United States has a system that permits them to accumulate information, and that the operatives in the embassy, it is their function to accumulate information and provide it to the state. Secondly, many of us have been coming out, speaking, and providing the evidence. Now, recently, on a visit to Little Africa, we exposed the government discrimination against that community. And the very government—
Where is Little Africa?
In Cariveton, where we did videos and show the discrimination, etc. And the very government acknowledged it without recognizing they acknowledged it. The same Barry Jagdeo runs into the area and promised them he can rectify all these things. If they weren't happening and it wasn't discrimination, how then you got to go and rectify it? So they are putting themselves in a bind. We pointed out, having been in a visit to Queenstown and Essequibo, where we went and see the only street that is being done in the community. It's predominantly Afro-Guyanese community. The only street that is being done is the one that PPP supporters living on near Bridgman Street. Then we went to Dartmouth, and all the roads are in a deplorable stage except one. And that one is Devon Street, which the lone PPP activist lives on. So there is mounting evidence of discrimination. It has arrived at the point where many Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Ghanaians who are not supporters of the AP and UAFC, they themselves begin to speak out about what is happening in the society. And so we have to understand how the PPP operates. In Jagdeo's mind, when he go out there and says that, he expects everybody to believe and follow, regardless of the conditions on the ground. An African who was at the oil and gas conference said one thing was obvious to him: the absence of Afro-Guyanese. And so you are dealing with a regime that knows it is discriminating, that knows that it is using the resources of the state to influence people, even the people who are discriminated against. And so his comments on the congressman are understandable, though in my opinion, they are stupid.
One of the things that we were able to point out immediately is the Trumpism in his comments. Jagdeo is following the Republican racist mold where they like to belittle Black people. And we don't shy away from discussing race and politics in America. And so right away, the congressman's people, his supporters, I myself, right away we saw his comments for being derogatory to Black people. We're uninformed and we don't read it. That's basically what he said. Somebody who was so highly educated. And, you know, we see it in the context of the PPP supporting the Republican slogan, all lives matter, to come to Black Lives Matter, when in fact, we know all lives matter. We're emphasizing the fact that yes, all lives matter, but when it comes to racism, police brutality, and injustice, Black lives must matter too. And that's why the slogan Black Lives Matter was brought into bear. Do you see it in the same context that I'm discussing it? That Jagdeo was following the Republican plan to belittle Black people?
Let me tell you how I see it. Jagdeo by nature is abusive. All the allegations that occurred in his so-called marital affairs, all the allegations are indicative of abuse. Let's now push that aside. Let's go to the second phase. If you listen to Jagdeo speak to PPP supporters when he goes out,
ministers of the government,
you will recognize that he lacks decency of any kind. And therefore, even to his insiders, he's abusive. So we put that down as a man being by nature abusive and power crazy. In the case of Trumpism, I think he might have benefited because they're the regime that helped him to come to power. And so he's probably operated in that mode. But the reality is, interwoven into the fabric of the operations of Bharrat Jagdeo is abuse, misuse of power, domination and control. And it is so obvious that even people that are PPP supporters are reacting to it. And it is in that context I will see him as a universal abuser that starts in the family, to the community, to the country. And there is
I'll push you a little on that. Do you think if Hakeem Jeffries was a Caucasian congressman, he would have said that? He doesn't read.
Would have said that.
He doesn't read and he's uninformed. But before I answer that,
there are two elements. If he was in a position where he's consciously articulating and looking at the options, he wouldn't. But if he's off the cuff, his inner nature will come out, and that comment will flow.
Well, the PPP was paying lobbyists during the recount period of the election to make statements for them. And in turn, the allegation is these lobbyists were making contributions to certain people's campaign. I haven't independently verified, but that's the allegation. Those members of Congress from Idaho and Florida never heard of Guyana. As a matter of fact, one of the members of Congress who issued a statement on behalf of the PPP is from California. And when the Trump administration had issued a ban for coronavirus, he made a comment, sorry, chicken pox. He made a comment about
monkey, not chicken pox.
Monkey, right. He made a comment linking Guyana instead of Ghana. So when you're talking about uninformed about Guyana, that reflects the members of Congress, the white members of Congress, that Republicans were technically hiring to make statements. And so we here in the diaspora found it very offensive, even racist, that Jagdeo would make that comment that the congressman is uninformed and doesn't read. I think the entire Congressional Black Caucus and Democratic Caucus is probably offended by that. And it's something that, again, will come up when we meet with the administration. So in the entire context of how I just described it, do you think that the PPP government is generally trying to disrespect Black members of Congress who speak out against them?
The PPP disrespects anybody who come up against them. If you're white, they might tone down the disrespect.
I've never seen them disrespect a white congressman.
Hold a minute. Hold a minute. There are cases where, unless you forget the former minister, Manik Chan, feral blast at the U.S. Embassy.
Right, but that was not a congressman. Okay, you're going to be right.
But the point I'm making,
they generally disrespect.
Correct.
Yeah.
So one has to recognize that that is their approach. They do not like a challenge. In their book, everything must be under their control. They must dominate. And anybody who doesn't allow them to do that becomes their enemy. And you see them unleash the different degrees of animosity, force, etc. against those people. I believe that when one looks at resource allocation in Guyana, and I'm a person who, when I'm looking at racism, I like to look at the structural element of it. It is one thing for a man to make a racist comment, but it's another thing when a system in a structured way allocate resources in such a way that it empowers one set of people and destroys the economic base of others. And for me, that is what is critical. I am on record as saying that Guyana should be governed for all Guyanese. All ethnic groups must benefit. All sections of the society must benefit. And what worries me most is the approach of the People's Progressive Party to Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese, and indigenous people who don't support them. Their position is that they should be destroyed and brought to their knees. That can never be good for Guyana. And that, I think, is the underpinning philosophy of the People's Progressive Party. And don't forget, they do it cognizant of the fact that they have a PR machinery and they believe in their PR machinery. So while they create 2 Guyanas or 3 Guyanas, they, in speaking to the international community, they talk about 1 Guyana. But then I'll invite the international community to ask them to put in the public domain the distribution of land along the Suzdijk-Linden Highway, and they will see the discrimination. Just go through the budget and look at the allocation of resources to regions and to institutions, and they would see the discrimination. If you inherited a budgeted route from Mabura to Linden, and you decided that you're not going to do the road, you're going to take it out, and only with the intervention of the British, you put it back. And then you go to Linden and say, oh, we will do the Mabura-Linden road. You're clearly a liar and deceitful. And these are things that characterize
PPP governance.
The PPP governance. So one has to see it in a very holistic way. Having accepted that they will do this road, it is well known that the Linden to Wismar to Mackenzie Bridge is a 1-lane road and will be kind of a stumbling block, will create congestion, etc. But they proceeded to say that they were not going to do the bridge. When I went to Linden for the opening town day and pointed out to the Lindeners that this was clear discrimination, he then went back and said, we're going to do the bridge. Here is a man who responds to anything not based on facts, not based on principle. The man is a pathological liar. And in the process, he does anything to achieve his end. And corruption or allegations of corruption are only one element of what we're dealing with here. It's a whole package.
I want to give you an opportunity to respond to the Office of President. When you attended the consultation with the President, which a lot of us were against because we knew that they were dishonest, they, in an attempt to belittle you or diminish you, said that you were not prepared for the consultation. Can you describe that meeting and also inform the diaspora about the steps that led to them appointing the commissions in violation of the Constitution, even though you were engaging them?
First of all, the contention that I wasn't prepared is garbage. When I arrived at the office of the president, all the press was there and who would have seen, they had to ask me to wait, to hold on, till they people could have come. Because even in the discussion, and Royce can confirm this, Anil Nandalal said, I didn't think y'all coming. So they were not prepared. What they had hoped to do was to just engage me and said they consulted. I had analyzed what they set out to do. Let me tell you what they set out to do. The first thing they set out to do was to invite me with the hope that I don't come. And then they say, I'm not honoring my constitutional obligation. So I turned up. They didn't expect me. And so they were scrambling. We then went into the discussions. I said to them, there's no basis on which I could do meaningful consultation because you haven't provided any details. I said, for example, there are no CVs. They undertook to send the CVs, which they did. Before we left, they were going in the direction of possibly two different statements. I said, no, let us agree that we will have one joint press statement. In the joint press statement, there were some differences. When the first one came to me, because I was waiting outside, I went by Nandalal and Roysdale was being engaged. When it came back, I saw that it wasn't couched in the context of in keeping with the Guyana Constitution. So I said, let us amend it to put that in there. In that document, we agreed that we are going to meet in 1 week. Let me tell you what happened. I was saying 2 weeks. The president said, no, that is too long. So I then turned and said I could say a day. Then he said a week. And I said, okay, let's agree. So we put it in the document that we will meet within the week. Now, the president did not meet in the week, which in my opinion suggested that they weren't prepared. Because they then sent a letter suggesting that the president was busy because he had the Agri-Expo and some other activity. Well, if you were a president 1 week before, didn't know what you were doing, then it is he was unprepared and incompetent. And then let me tell you what they did. They obviously knew I was going out to town on an outreach because the information was in the public domain. They sent a letter Friday afternoon after working hours, inviting me to the consultation the Monday. By the time I got and I saw it, I thought, one, it was disrespectful because first of all, you agreed with me within a week, and you didn't. And secondly, you clearly timed it to be able to either ensure I come on your schedule and time, which I wasn't prepared to do, or I don't go, and then you say what you wanted to say. They then proceeded after I said to them that it was late, I wasn't going to be there, and they proceeded to swear in who they wanted to swear in. Look,
is there any provision in the law that allows them to do that, even if there is no consultation, or you don't make yourself available for consultation? Does the president have the power under the Constitution to proceed to make these appointments? I'm not aware.
From my understanding, there's no such provision. I believe they will again run to the doctrine of necessity, but it is something we're challenging. But let me also continue. In the very first letter, I pointed out to them that, look, this society wants the chancellor and the chief justice to be appointed. And I said it was strange that you didn't put it on the agenda. The president, through Gail Teixeira, wrote back saying, the president is decide when he consulted, when he ready. He can tell me. So I sent them a nice letter saying, as leader of the opposition, I am giving consent to the appointment of the Chancellor Janet Cummins and the Chief Justice Roxanne George Wilshire. So that is left there. The ball is in their court. I believe that they have been outmaneuvered, but it is their right to say who was prepared and who wasn't prepared. There are some other issues about it that I know, but that I can't discuss here. But I think they are in their own jeopardy. And I don't think it is the Police Service Commission they wanted. They wanted another commission, but that's for another conversation.
All right, we wind down here. Let me come back to the Constitution and the doctrine of necessity that you made reference to. Even though I've heard Nandlal made that argument in public, the Constitution is very clear. The doctrine of the Constitution is very clear. In the case of the appointment of the chairman of the Elections Commission or the commission, the law has a proviso. If the opposition leader fails to nominate 6 names to be considered for the appointment of chairman of the Elections Commission, and those names are not acceptable to the president, then there's a provision that says he then proceeds on his own deliberate judgment to make that appointment. There's no such provision in the Constitution with regard to the appointment of these commissions. And there's no provision in the Constitution for the application of some doctrine of necessity. That's an imposition by the court.
By the law, you can't challenge the commission. What we have to challenge is the appointment of the chairman of the commission. The commission.
What are you talking about? The Elections Commission?
No, the Police Service Commission.
Right.
Parliament agreed on the names to constitute the commission. Okay? However, the law stipulates that the appointment of the chairman must be a meaningful consultation.
Right.
And that is what was violated.
Right. Okay. Finally, you have been elected opposition leader. You've recently also been elected leader of the PNC. There's widespread dissatisfaction with some members of the party coming back even before your time, resulting from the actions of President Granger and how the elections matter was handled. And you still have a lot of disaffected constituents and members. What are you doing to bring the party together, to give back confidence, or to win back the confidence of supporters and members alike, and then widen the support base of the coalition so that you can win the next election?
First of all, one of the first things I did while I campaigned was to ensure I attack no one, that I campaign on what I will do. The hope then was that I'll be able to engage people after. I did engage. You know, we have co-opted some people to the executive, etc. But political wounds are not wounds that heal in a day. They take time. What I'm seeking to do is to build a party from the bottom. meeting all the members, organizing our groups, ensuring that groups are up and functioning. There are a number of regions that we get going. The East Bank is functioning. People are doing their outreach on their own, etc. So for me, it's building the base. The second thing is to utilize people based on their skill sets, which I'm seeking to do. But I am also cognizant of the fact that in all political parties, there will be differences, and that you have to work to deal with those differences, but not be idealist to believe you're going to solve all those problems. For me, it is very critical that we mobilize our base, have them functioning. We then move out to mobilize other interest groups, while at the same time working to bring persons in the leadership of the party into the fold. We also have got to find a new crop of young people to mold and to place in positions. And so I believe that process is ongoing. I'm of the view that, well, one of the things I'm doing here while I'm in the United States is to make my notes and sit down and review my own performance to decide areas that I need to make changes and to seek to improve the party. There are a lot of work going on in the party in terms of our properties, etc., but that is for another time.
Okay. Final question, because then I have to go. There's a news item that broke today saying the government has removed the chief of staff, Brigadier of the GDF, Brigadier Godfrey Best, and his deputy chief of staff, or the next senior person, Colonel Skeet, and sent them abroad for training, and intends to announce the appointment of Omar Khan, Colonel Omar Khan, as the next chief of staff, and he'll be promoted to brigadier, superseding Colonel Skeet. If that report is through, what's your reaction to that?
Well, it's again the manifestation of the racism of the People's Progressive Party. And it is also a manifestation of the fact that they do not believe in a meritocracy. It's a manifestation of the fact that they are prepared or willing to do whatever they like and will only be curtailed if challenged. I don't know the details, but I've been hearing rumors a while back that they intend to appoint Omar Khan. There are people in the Guyana Defense Force who I know disagrees, and they will be affecting the morale of the Guyana Defense Force. But they don't care. They think that once they control one person, they can do as they like. It is foolhardy. A defense force is a combination of people and not necessarily one person.
There's a question here that I want to ask you from the public, and it relates to police brutality. But before I do that, I happen to think that the appointment of an acting chancellor and an acting chief justice without the consent of the opposition leader is unconstitutional, because that's the thrust of the Constitution requires consent, in my view, to perform the duties. And that's the basis of the provision in the Constitution to enhance democracy, not to have an executive that is all powerful that makes these decisions. What's your view on that?
Well, first of all, again, I don't think the government subscribed to separation of powers. The government believes that the executive must dominate. Then I've heard all of these pronouncements. As far as I recall, Yonette Cummings is the substantive Chief Justice. If some of the rumors going around, as I understand it, while Renee was acting, this is Carl Singh. If I recall, she was the substantive Chief Justice. And then when he went,
I don't think so.
Right.
Okay.
Even if it isn't correct.
Right.
But I thought she was. But even if she isn't,
right,
it is very difficult for me to see how the government is going to move her,
right,
promote to other people and put her back as
another
ordinary puny judge.
Appeal,
I find that
appellate judge, justice of the Court of Appeal.
I don't know if
she's a substantive Court of Appeal judge.
No, she is a substantive, but I'm telling you based on what is rumored.
Oh, well, they can't do that.
Well, they shouldn't.
What I shouldn't. Right, they can't. It's not going to be allowed to do it. But what I want to get onto is this concept of circumventing the constitutional provision that requires consultation with the consent of the opposition leader and making acting appointments. My contention is it is not lawful. And I've been discussing it with
my own view, and from the advice I've had from legal people, is that it is lawful. The only way we can know if it is lawful or not is
well, that's the, do you attempt to challenge it? If they don't,
no, I'm prepared to do more engagement with the lawyers,
okay,
and see where it is going, and then decide whether we challenge it or not. But the advice I've been getting so far is that what they're doing is it is lawful.
Well, successive governments have done it.
Correct.
But there's a body of
no, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not saying yes or no to it.
Right.
I have to get the legal advice and then deal with it. But I'm saying, to me, the issue is a wider issue where the government doesn't subscribe to separation of powers and rule of law, and therefore the things that they do will not fit into a democratic construct. That is the point of it.
This burning issue.
Remember, it's only half hour we had.
I know, but I want to get the audience participation. There's somebody who asked a question about the brutality meted out to the people of Guyana by the police and the killing of young black men, which has commenced. This person just asked a question: why every time a black person is killed by the police, we have a protest for a few days, and the opposition speaks out, and then there's no follow-up action, there's nothing that results from it, the government is not held accountable, the police is not held accountable. We know in the Boston case, somebody has been charged with murder, but that's the exception rather than the practice. What would you say to this young person?
I would say to the person this: the opposition will continue to do what it has to do, but you have to understand what happens in these processes. In these processes, the government become involved in bribing people. They become involved in using the police force against protesters. And what they do is instill fear. What we have to do is to do work to ensure people are not afraid and willing to stand up. And more, at every protest that comes, you're seeing that people are willing to stand up. There are some other things I can discuss with you off of here that will help us in this process. But as presently structured, the government is using the state apparatus to repress every element of protest. And while there is scope for protest and we will protest, it has to be done in a particular way in strategic places to achieve our objective.
And I would add to the person that the people have the power. The people in any country, the people have the power. So you have the power to hold the government accountable.
The people have the power, but the people also has to be mobilized and motivated to wield that power.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for coming. Don't go anywhere. Keep sharing the link. We'll now be joined by Attorney at Law and Member of Parliament Amanza, Walton, Desir, and Attorney at Law Darren Wade. Keep sharing the link. I'll be back in 60 seconds. Yes, they're seeing us. Hi, everybody. I'm back. I'm back. We have here Amanza Walton Desir, Member of Parliament, Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs, Attorney at Law, and of course, Mr. Darren Wade. Before they accuse us before they accuse us, Amanza, you want to come close to me? You can come close to me, Amanza. So we get you fully in there. Yeah. Okay, great. Let's start the discussion. I'll start with you, Amanza. What's your reaction to the Jagdeo bribery scandal and the video Vice News report?
Well, like I said this morning,
you can project your voice a little.
We said this midday on Sherrod. It's no surprise. What it does is it basically confirms what Guyanese have known all along. But we've never had the video evidence of how these transactions are facilitated. So it's no surprise to me. It is alarming that what I've seen, for example, President Ali come out challenging Vice News to air the entire interview. A newsroom has put out something that says that this is his position. So I'm disappointed at that reaction. But for me, it's not surprising. It just corroborates and confirms what every Guyanese living in Guyana and abroad, what we know, that the Jagdeo regime runs a kleptocratic, autocratic, dictatorial system of government. And I wait with bated breath to see, well, not bated breath, but I wait to see how Irfan Ali handles this.
Mr. Wade?
Well, thank you, Rickford. First, let me say this. As a citizen of Guyana, Bharrat Jagdeo is entitled to his right to presumption of innocence until he's innocent until proven guilty. He has all right to claim. Yes, his claim is other right.
There's a difference in the court of public opinion.
I understand, but certainly it is troubling that purported investors, as we learned and we saw, could have access to him, direct access to his home. You know, that was definitely shocking for me. And to discuss investment, and he himself said that in the interview that he will deal with that aspect on the government part. Right. So he was basically claiming to say, okay, whatever I say, the government will accept.
Right.
I could get it done. I am the point person, you know, and to see it be done in that fashion, you know, that certainly is a concern of all of us. And I believe that there should be some sort of investigation, some sort of tribunal investigated and look at all contracts that the PPP that was being issued under the PPP administration.
You both lawyers. Bharrat Jagdeo, when he released the Vice News interview, and the press started following up, even in his press conference that he held after. But during the Vice News interview that he released, I'm not sure why Irfan Ali is now calling for them to release the entire interview. We saw it. Jagdeo released it. He said that he doesn't know Sue beyond pleasantries. He said that Sue is not involved in any business with him. But on the tape, it is Sue who took these alleged or purported investors, basically who were undercover journalists, to Jagdeo, and based on Vice News's report, with the intent of discussing a bribe. And when they asked Jagdeo about that aspect of it, which he was pretty aware of, he said, let Sue handle that. Sue handles all the contracts and agreements, etc. I'm adding to that gratuities and fees and bribes. Amanza, you don't have to comment on the last part, but Jagdeo told the nation he doesn't know Sue beyond, who, Sue? Yeah, he's my tenant. I don't know him beyond the regular pleasantries. And then we see Sue escorting investors to his home, and he's sitting there like a mob boss in a dark room talking with investors about investments when we have Go Invest, a legal entity responsible for that. But in addition to that, he acknowledged in the Vice News interview that Sue is a lobbyist. a lobbyist. So if he doesn't know Sue beyond the morning, how are you doing, and so where's my rent, how does he know Sue's a lobbyist? And then what is Sue doing in his house with purported investors discussing a bribe?
But you have outlined it correctly. The issue is not whether there is certainty as to whether a bribe was paid or not. We must understand that what we are seeing is just the demonstrable undermining of our institutions. And that has to be of concern to Guyanese. There is no justification for you meeting investors in your living room. That is the
Except it's to discuss a bribe.
Go invest. And you have to give Jagdeo credit. He's been doing this long enough to know that he is not going to discuss a bribe with anybody. But when all of the circumstances are taken together, it is an odious situation. It is quite improper. Now, if you look at the fact that Jagdeo came out denying that he had any in-depth knowledge of Sue. Well, Sue is my friend, and he's a tenant and so on and so forth. He clearly at that time was unaware that he was recorded saying that Sue will get all of the support. And the question is, why is Sue getting all of the support?
Not only support, Sue is in charge of the agreement, right?
Sue is in charge of the contracts. What does Anil Nandlal do? He's the government chief legal advisor. All of these circumstances create a very odious situation that at the bare minimum should necessitate the VP stepping aside to at least facilitate.
So you think he should resign?
He must to facilitate an impartial investigation. And I have no confidence that that can be done locally. I know that the US Embassy has said that accountability is important. They've issued a statement on this vice issue. I am at least grateful that they acknowledge that there needs to be some kind of accountability for what has happened. But this situation, Rickford and Darren, it borders on ridiculous. And Irfan Ali calling for the entire interview to be aired. Clearly,
what entire? I didn't see that report. What entire interview?
Newsroom said that they've done an interview with him. The entire interview with Vice News and Bharrat Jagdeo.
But Bharrat Jagdeo already
aired that.
You
recall a few days before the oil and gas conference.
Yes.
Now, what he said in that interview is that he painted a picture that there were measures to ensure transparency, and he quoted a lot of what was on the books. But what the Vice News interview reveals is that they don't follow what is on the books.
The laws.
Because if you did, they would have been meeting at Go Invest and not in his living room. Because the Investment Act at Section 39 says that Go Invest is the legal entity vested with the responsibility of promoting and facilitating investment, not Jagdeo's.
But maybe Jagdeo think he is Go Invest.
Well, the Act further says that the minister with responsibility for Go Invest is the minister with responsibility for finance, and that happens to be one Ashni Singh.
Are you sure?
But you have to be very careful, though, because there's no minister financing that.
No. The Act specifically says that the minister means the minister with responsibility for finance.
But we don't know who's that.
No, Ashni Singh is related with that responsibility.
Minister in the office of the president with responsibility for finance.
Yes. That is his designation.
Yes.
So,
but then Bharrat Jagdeo, so
has no jurisdiction to be looking at this.
But I'm looking at it this way. Since he's the vice president, so I'm wondering, and you see, I believe the president can finance himself. That's how I looked at it. That's my view. So I'm just saying that Bharrat Jagdeo, the vice president, probably is one of Ashni Singh's supervisors.
Well, then why doesn't Mark Phillips take up procurement or going to finance? The law makes very clear provision and division related to the allocation of responsibilities. For that portfolio, as far as the public is aware, is not within his purview.
But nonetheless,
if it were to have a meeting in his living room, is wholly improper
unethical.
and unethical. And so we have to call, I believe, for his resignation and for an impartial investigation into the matter.
Yes, no, what I was saying, I said nonetheless, I believe, are you actually saying or Jagdeo, which one of them is as the authority? It is still go invest. Who should be engaged? You know, what is ironic? I was listening to an interview with Bharrat, Jagdeo, Irfan Ali. They are somewhere in Queens. And someone in that meeting was complaining that they went to Guyana and tried to meet with the boss to go and vex. I mean, the video speaks around through, right? And Bharrat Jagdeo was saying that he wants the system to work, that you must be able to go to the auditor, go to the county staff, and be able to file your papers and so forth, and trust the system to work.
Do you believe anything Bharrat Jagdeo says?
But but this meeting in his living room go contrary to that. But so you will have no confidence as an ordinary man.
Who was the counterperson? Bharrat was the man behind the desk.
Yeah, so that of itself shows that you cannot have confidence in the system. If you're an honest and decent guy like you, Rickford, and you want to go to Guyana and to invest, you will know that it makes no sense going to go invest. You want to get to Bharrat Jagdeo or persons close to Bharrat Jagdeo. In a legal profession, you wouldn't want to come to Darren Wade or Amanza or someone with decent lawyers out there. You will want to go to one of those lawyers that are close to Bharrat Jagdeo, who has the ears of Bharrat Jagdeo, because you believe that they could make things happen.
But it's
not the system, but the players in the system.
But Darren Jagdeo has confirmed that. What were his words? Sue is my friend.
Yes.
Sue gets all the support. The corollary of that is, if you're not my friend, you're not getting support. And this bears up what we've been saying.
And also the interview said that he said it in the interview with Sue that you know that he help people. People come to him all the time.
You're perfectly right. That's what I do. I help people.
They come to me and
in my living room in a dark corner, he looked like a mob boss. Seriously, in that part of the, they're probably going to say that the video was doctored to portray Bharrat in the back room, but he looked like something out of the Godfathers with a mob boss. He sit on there in this big chair in the back.
But before all this, we hear this intellectually and brilliantly, if you want to say that. They are persons of the who will be glorifying Bharrat Jagdeo. People in communities that you will believe are not big communities who see him as a hero because they believe that they could call up him and get things done. So we must be cognizant of that fact. There will be the people we support us also who will be supporting and celebrating Bharrat Jagdeo.
Well, people celebrated Roger Khan. People celebrated the vilest criminals, the most violent criminals and politicians that commit crimes all the time. So it's very usual for people to glorify criminals.
But the issue is, let's go back politically. The issue is, how do the opposition treat with that politically? How do the opposition get the confidence? Because Bharrat Jagdeo is very popular in Guyana. He's very popular in opposition communities. And people like him in opposition. How do the opposition, they go then and say, man, this is not the way?
Information. You're saying it. Sensitizing and educating people.
He's exactly right. You have to make people aware of what good governance looks like.
And Bharrat, this record.
What has happened is that you have had 23 years of PPP rule, and things have been done so incorrectly for such a long time that you have institutionalized wrongdoing. And this is why, if you notice what the leader was saying earlier, it is important to go back into communities and to begin to talk to people about what
re-educate them,
governance looks like, because 23 years is an entire generation that has been conditioned to think that passing a bribe is correct. And it is borne out in the Vice News interview, because the Chinese man said that it's all about the money, and he would be surprised if they weren't corrupt. And everything has to be done under the table. Now, that has to be such a harrowing thing for legitimate, hardworking businessmen who try to operate in a particular way to hear that the perception is. And they've complained about it as well, that unless you want to get involved in bribe giving and skullduggery, you cannot make it as a businessman in Guyana. Now that would explain why the private sector commission is so quiet. Had that been David Granger, had that been Aubrey Norton, this morning everybody would have been calling for their necks. because our society, unfortunately, and this ties into the point that Darren is making, has been conditioned to call wrong right and right wrong. And that has to stop if we are going to build a country that will see Guyanese being able to enjoy a particular quality of life.
But also, Darren, I want to come back to your point, and Amanza can jump in after. I see it as a failure that Bharrat Jagdeo is greeted or seen as some sort of hero, or he's being glorified. Jagdeo is responsible for the murder, he and his government, of over 1,400 Black people. And so Amanza mentioned 23 years of PP rule. I mean, Jagdeo has dominated the scene. The people who have grown up during that period of time only know Jagdeo. They just became knowledgeable of David Granger as president. But all through but the opposition has not, the coalition has not educated the people enough for them to understand what happened under Jagdeo's presidency. And I see them talking, I saw the question just now about the killing of Quindon Bacchus. That's what happened under Jagdeo every day, right? But these young people don't know that. They hear us talking about, we want an investigation, but we have not made it our duty and obligation to continuously educate the Black community or opposition community or the country, the nation, and the diaspora about the evils of the Bharrat Jagdeo regime, the murderous conduct of the Bharrat Jagdeo regime, the criminal enterprise that was the Bharrat Jagdeo regime. So it's a failure of the opposition to do that, and civil society as well. You're talking about private sector commission. Private sector commission, where are you? You have a vice president allegedly meeting people at his home to collect bribes for investments. Why is the private sector commission? Oh, you mean the PPP private sector commission? Maybe that's why they're an entity of the PPP. But Darren, I wanted to come back to you with regard to the failure of the opposition to educate our young people, all these different generations that came up under the PP rule and into the Granger rule, about the evils of the Jagdeo regime.
I think one of the things that is lacking tremendously, quite frankly, let me be honest with you, in the opposition, is boots on the ground. The opposition needs to be relatable. They need to go down to the people. They need to reach the people. So the man in the street, they could find relevance, and appreciate what is being said. Too often times we obviously we have shows like this and so forth. But the man in the street, the man in the ground, in the communities, it is not relatable. We just came out of government. And so there are a lot of persons in our communities that haven't forgiven some of the opposition once we were in government, because the reach. So what Jagdeo is providing alternative the reach to these persons, to him, which was not there before. We could have got formal meetings and so forth in the communities and so on. So sometimes Jagdeo, I remember when I was in government, Mr. Granger had mentioned something in relation to guys on the corners, and they have
selling plant.
They have again this time, but so Jagdeo's now talking and say, oh, look, he's attacking your business. Because so those are the things that I believe hurt us as well. When Jagdeo said these things, you could find out, if I am a man that
Jagdeo is not the only man who got mouth and who could.
But if I have a bar, I know you coming to say, okay, you should not, that's your business, you're attacking me.
Right.
So I mean, those are the things also to make it relatable. My thing is really and truly is if we must start from anew, we could say to our supporters, yes, we would have made some mistakes. We are sorry, and it just give us a second opportunity and let us start over. I think that is how we need to look at it, because there are persons out there who are angry. Because if we get into who is right or who is wrong and so forth, it's going to be a continue back and forth.
But why? But hold on.
I'm sorry, I think I have to interject here, because I think that has been established. I think when you hear most of us speak, you acknowledge that there were mistakes made. And you always have to, I think we're very quick to shoot ourselves because we do not look at the bigger context. This is the bigger context. You are looking at a period of 25 years, 26 years, because you had a government for 23 and another one with an effective tenure of 3 years. You will not get everything right after 23 years out of office. Okay? I believe that if we strip it down, what you will see happening during these 3 effective years of coalition government, and I was a public servant during that time, so I'm not necessarily defending the APNUFC government, but what I saw was an attempt to do something that is fundamental to our democratic growth, and that is building our institutions. You will recall something as simple as the Public Procurement Commission. While it was on the books for 10 years, already in the Constitution, the PPP never enacted it. It was the...
But isn't that the opposition's fault to not go to court and get some sort of order ordering them to obey the Constitution?
Well, look, you can argue that, but it is important to note that it was done under the coalition government. Now you have a situation where the Public Procurement Commission, even though the names have been agreed, are yet to be installed. I say that to say this. We give Bharrat Jagdeo too much credit.
I believe that.
We give him too much credit.
Yes.
All that he is good at is playing psychological games with our people.
And being a racist.
That is what he is good at. I will not give him credit because none is due. Because
Right.
when I sit down and look at all of the projects implemented under him, you show me the ones that have been successful. From the Skeldon Sugar Estate to the fiber optic cable to name anyone. The Amalia Fall project. There has been not a single major public sector investment initiative that he has run that has been successful.
But I don't think, Darren will explain that, but I think what Darren is trying to point to is his abilities as a politician to try to identify or claim to identify with the common man or the man in the street. And I think that's where the PPP is excelling, or not, I would say excelling, but the PPP is good at deception, right? They deceive the population to make them believe that they're on their side. But in the back rooms and so on, they're doing what Jagdeo was doing, and they're telling them, hey, see them black people out in Buxton and Golden Grove, so they get them the road, and so on. We got our supporters, because that's how they're governing. But they're giving this face, like if they, like for instance, One Guyana. There's nothing about their policy that suggests promotion of One Guyana, but their PR, the PR and their overseas public relations consumption is One Guyana, One Guyana. But when they go to,
And then they go
on the ground,
show black people on the ground. For example,
right?
I read an article by my brother and friend. Let me say this: I know Samuel Medas from UG. I think he's a good, decent person, and so on. He's a one of probably the most successful musicians we have in Guyana currently. So when you go, I noticed Samuel one. He mentioned recently about a racial encounter that he had at the bank.
Right.
But Samuel with us is part and parcel. Whether or not he doesn't aware what he's doing. Whenever he, and he's a Christian, by the way, whenever he goes to any of these programs for One Guyana to sing and to perform, he's helping to push that false narrative.
Right.
What are our young people doing to go out there and to meet people like Samuel Medas? Those, we can say, look, I was there, okay, Samuel, I understand that Irfan or Bharrat may give you all sort of offers and say certain things. But this is our side of the story. This is what we offer. Is there any attempt to meet those type of persons? You see, we can only defeat the PPP by, and the leader said it there just now, by a broad base, that's my view, coalition. We have everybody in society that joins the fight.
Right. I've always been saying that. We want the farmers, the agriculturists, the lecturers.
You are absolutely correct, which is why every time I speak, I ask, what is the role of labor? And I keep harkening back to the point that when you look at any proper civil rights movement or any political movement, it has never been just a political party. You've always had labor, you've always had civil society, and those moving in tandem is what you need to confront dictatorship. The issue that Darren raised is quite correct in terms of having to be on the ground. The reason that Jagdeo has been able to assume this godlike status is
Oh, yes, a
because-
godlike status.
No, this is what
When you go on the man on the street,
no, this is what the perception is. It certainly isn't it to me.
no, me.
Because I am able to look at things in a particular
Well, that is
way
because
and
of the
cause an
incompetence.
evaluation.
Jagdeo has been able
In
to
the absence
dominate, I would say
of,
dominate.
in the absence of water, people drink sand.
Right.
Am I sitting here and saying that the opposition does not have to up its game? Absolutely
Yes.
not. There are things that must be done.
Right.
But what I will also say is that I will not condone the convenient ignoring of certain facts.
Right.
And that is that if you look at Guyana's even financial performance over the time Barry Jagdeo was in leadership,
There's nothing good is
in
connected to
proper
Bharrat.
leadership,
But-
it was the slowest growing in the economy.
Right.
We had failed infrastructural projects. What we have to keep hammering home to our people is do not be deceived. The PPP is Goebbelsian in their propaganda, and they understand one thing, that if you repeat a lie often enough,
Sounds like
it
true.
becomes the truth to people. And that is where I believe we have to be able to match them in continuing to expose their
But I'm not going to say that. That is all good for the intellectual. People are bright. But for the man in the street now who will probably think he will get a contract and then he'll hustle and so forth. A lot of people in our community feel like, they could get a cleaning contract, they could get a little, for instance, you mentioned procurement, procurement commission and so forth. When we are in office, we basically should shoot our supporters in the feet in the sense that we are required 5 years experience for contracts, which was absolutely, I believe you probably mentioned it already, absolutely ridiculous, because what we did, we cemented the PPP corrupt people and while going in office and getting resources and so forth, without creating equitable distribution and taking, you're like using America, affirmative action to help our people.
You know, that what I would say is this. Now, hold on. The same Procurement Act provides that there has to be a carve out and a set aside for small businesses that did not meet the requirements. So right in there is an attempt.
But those small
to
businesses
ensure
are the same people who do the big.
No.
Many times that was it.
No,
They were getting
no. My point is this. My point is
We're not
this.
beating up.
That no, I don't. Listen to me.
This is
What
a
we
really
have
good
to-
productive discussion.
What we have to do is that we have to engage in these nuances.
Yes, we do.
So that our people are edified about what we're saying.
Our people need, what our people need,
But hold on.
they need to be confident.
Right.
That when we go back in government, we're going to deliver for them.
Yes.
They need to have the confidence that we are going to give them what they deserve.
Absolutely.
Because the two of our people are struggling.
Absolutely.
Right. So we want to see you run for leadership. Become a memory center. Like that.
No, I ran, anyway.
This is so important. This type of discussion is so important because it is exactly what Jagdeo capitalizes on.
Right.
He is the master
Deception.
of not only deception,
Dishonesty.
but he not only dishonesty, but he is the master of causing us not only to not shine the spotlight on him brightly enough. You see, Bar Jagdeo does not like to be exposed. And so he is the master of distractions. He distracts us by questioning our competence and our confidence and having our people question
Do the same
themselves.
Right.
And it is something that
And
we
question
must
their
not-
leaders.
And question their leaders. It is something that we must not, because you do not see them doing it. You have a man sitting in a living room accommodating requests and saying, instead of saying Peter Ramsrup will get all of the support, he's saying it's Sue. And
Right.
you dare to tell me that I must question my
And
competence.
nobody in the PPP
and get
is
such
questioning that.
Nobody is questioning it.
Guided.
You are, no, you're not in the PPP. But the point is that they have mastered that.
But nobody in the PPP got any morale.
You challenge it.
I understand, which is why I want to keep the focus on Bar Jagdeo and his incompetence, because I have worked 20-something years in government now, and I understand that you cannot do good governance overnight, and you cannot overnight dismantle 23 years of just corruption, incompetence that is ingrained in a mechanism.
But what we could have done is held them accountable. We didn't.
We could have held them accountable. You know, issue with that.
Right.
Me about that.
Okay, I want to come back to an issue Darren raised, and you were a member of parliament, senior member of parliament in the opposition, because you were a shadow minister. One of the things people are complaining, we know you're out there, you're everywhere, There are some members of the opposition, how much y'all 31? People don't know them, people know who they are. Why? What is going on? And you know what we're gonna start? We gotta start calling some names of some opposition members of parliament. Where people are complaining, who's my MP? Somebody calling from the interior. I'm like, well, you gotta raise up with your MP, but we know who's the MP.
Yeah, but you know what? I believe that there are mechanisms that will facilitate that internally.
Meaning?
And I believe, okay, so if you're not sure who your MP is, call your local party office and they can give you that information. That is absolutely the type of education of the public that we must do. Hold on a second. I do not always support the name and shame.
I will not tight on this pen here. Tight on next question.
No, I do not always support the naming and shaming.
Right.
That must be your last resort until all the other measures have been.
But let me ask a question there. Why must the person call? This is an innocent question. Why must the person call a party of to find out who the MP? Shouldn't that MP be in the community, working with the people? When there's an issue, go to the people, sit down with them, help to solve their problem, be the contact, the liaison between the government or whatever agency and the people. They should be so much in the community that nobody has to ask who is the MP.
But I am not doubting, but suppose I'm just moving into a community now and I've not been exposed to all of this.
It doesn't matter if you're the MP.
My point is, no, not me the MP, but a resident. The point is that there have to be mechanisms. If you're not sure, you will find out. Am I saying that more can't be done? Absolutely. You said it that there are a couple of us who are always out there.
Right. The
issue, however, you cannot run away from it, is one of resources as well. We have been calling for members of parliament to have at a bare minimum
offices
like you do in the US, offices that are provided for by the state.
In every region. So the regional office should have an MP office.
The regional office should have an MP office that MPs can go to.
Yes, I agree. I've been calling for that too.
Not that. What opposition members of parliament have is a $1,000 monthly stipend, and that is the amount of support that they receive.
Everybody.
Well, the leader of the opposition office is different, but every member of parliament, that is the extent to which they some of their travel are paid, etc. But that is the extent of it. You therefore are putting members of parliament in a position that if they have to rent an office,
they can't rent the constituency.
They cannot rent in their constituencies. Because how are they meeting that cost? And so you see, it is easy for people to call to do this, to call to do that, but nobody stops to ask whether or to request of the National Assembly, which they can lawfully provide, to provide office accommodation for members of parliament.
So now we have to start a campaign.
That is what we must be doing.
Members of parliament to have offices in their constituencies.
If there's a regional office, the regional MP must have an office there so that people can go and meet that member of parliament. You will note, Rickford, that the allocation in the national budget to the office of the First Lady is twice that of the allocation to the office of the opposition. And so I rather suspect that when people are saying the MP should be doing this, the MP should be doing that, they are perhaps of the view that they have the resources to do it. And so I am saying that they can help by requiring that the National Assembly in its budget, Parliament office in its budget, provide constituency offices, right? To provide constituency offices. And I know people are saying about when you're coming out to vote, etc. When you are coming out to vote, you are in campaign mode. There is campaign financing. So it's a different kettle of fish altogether. And I suspect that we have to keep talking with our people so that they understand. But I fully support constituency offices for every MP in their office, where people can go, meet with them, and have their cases and concerns resolved.
Well, I see somebody talk about accountability. I think she's explained what she means by not calling people out. But that's one of the things I wrote on recently. I even compared it to Trinidad. Even a simple country like Trinidad has constituency offices for the MPs, and it's something that I think what complicates it in Guyana's situation is I don't think the parties do a good job of making their members of parliament who are not elected by the constituencies but are assigned constituencies, don't do a good job introducing these MPs to their constituencies, embedding them in the constituencies. In addition to that, they need resources from the Parliament office. I remember Member of Parliament for Region 4, the East Coast, Maureen Philadelphia, making the exact same point and explaining to us, and I think you've also done it publicly before, where she has to take money from her pocket to go and render constituency services. That's unacceptable, completely unacceptable. So Guyanese, start a movement, start a campaign to have your members of parliament be provided with the resources and the office in the region so that they can help you guys. Because most of the things you guys call me for, y'all got call y'all MP. Like, I get thousands of messages every week where people are telling me, oh, my job this, my job that, this, that. There's a road in my village that is not fixed. I'm like, pull me out of it, Brooklyn. I don't know what I can do. But those are things that you should call your, and there should be a proper public education program where people understand, okay, certain things you call your city council members or your NDC members. Then you go to your regional councillors and your regional chairman. And then on national issues, they don't differentiate the difference between local, regional, and national.
And that is where the education of the population becomes important.
Right.
And because there are such programs is why, I mean, developed nations are able to build the societies that they have built, because it is all premised on, you may call it voter education, you may call it civics, but there's an understanding of how things work. Because a street in success could be within the purview of the regional office of success, and they may have the budget to so do. And I fully agree that this type of education needs to be brought to bear so that this can happen. I want to be very, very clear that this is not about making excuses, but it is about confronting the realities of what is on the ground. And it's also about confronting the realities that the resources need to be provided for people to do effective work. If you provide an office for the MP and they do not show up on the constituency, then they must be held accountable unless they're sick or something.
Right.
You understand?
One of the things, and Darren, you jump here. One of the things that we're accustomed to, right, is that maybe we have to start introducing this in our politics. I know we have it to some extent. In the United States, and even if you go to London, you see your elected representatives at everything. PTA meeting, community meeting. We have Congress on the corner where the congressman comes and meets everybody in the corner. You ain't gotta go to the office. Everything there's in the community, the elected representatives are there. And mostly church services. Church is the political stomping ground because, you know, voters are in church. Those are the older folks. If you go to church, you're a little more responsible and you're likely to be registered because churches promote civic engagement. We don't see that in Ghana. Is it time for us to adopt that kind of model of politics?
Rickford, let me say, I agree with Amanza. Sounds very good. I agree with you. But Rickford, your way is the alternative to what Mrs. Amanza Desir say. Your way is that, and I agree with you, Rickford. Church services. You go to church, you go to PTA meetings and so forth. In addition to that, Rickford, for the PNC, that we have offices in the various regions that could be utilized. So yes, Ms. Desir is correct. Yes, Mr. Desir is correct. There's lack of resources and so on. But what are we going to do until those resources are provided? Go to the public, get public meeting, like the Congress on the corner, go and meet the guys on the corner, walk around, meet with people. Those are the things I believe do not take so much, maybe take time. And yes, MPs may have the jobs, you may be a teacher, you may be an attorney and so forth. But what Rickford means sometimes for free.
And they have their family.
I have family, Rickford. I have family too, Rickford, because I have family. But I'm being called out. But you see, I hear you, I agree with you, I listen to you. What I'm saying, many times I was called out for my house. One time I traveled from West Bobbies. To West Demerara. When I reach, I get a political phone call. You have to go back
Always.
So when school board, my wife is upset and so forth. But those are the sacrifices you mentioned. Go to church every Sunday. As I say, PTA meeting. Once a thing come back, go down there.
But gentlemen, I want to make this point because this underscores exactly what I've been saying. You have on the table right now a vice president caught with his pants down. That is where we must be focusing at this time, because that is what we have to confront.
No, I agree.
Hold on a second, let me finish. Because when we get into these discussions, and there's a time and place for these discussions, but I am saying that now our focus has to be with
not
all
the
of our shortcomings, not the distractions, but to hold it Bar Jagdeo accountable for the selling off of our nation.
Right.
I said in my budget presentation earlier in the year that we have a cocktail of corruption, of the breakdown of the procurement system, and of the willful neglect of public servants and the poor and working class.
I agree. So they're using the procurement, the process to transfer the wealth of the country to themselves and their supporters. Right.
That has to be our focus. Right. So I want to talk about what we are doing to mobilize our people to demand Jagdeo's resignation.
Right.
We must talk about, hold on, gentlemen, we must talk about how are we going to agitate in the diplomatic circles and in the international community for his removal. Right. We must sound our voices right now on calling for a full and independent inquiry into this matter. We will talk about the capacity of the members of parliament, etc. But every Guyanese who is on the side of law and order, their sole focus right now must be to call out Jagdeo. Because believe me, when you look at the comments on their Facebook, there's no response. You hear about rigging and you hear about elections. As if the recount has not clearly established who is sitting in the seat of government based on fraudulent votes. And so I am saying that it is time that we stop scattering shots and that we focus on calling for Bar Jagdeo's resignation and calling for Irfan Ali to establish himself as a credible voice for democracy by demanding his resignation and demanding that he steps aside because he purports to be the president.
I have no faith in Irfan Ali.
Let me say this. One of the reasons why this discussion was important was because there's this big issue in the diaspora where people feel that there's not enough being done on the ground in Guyana, and these questions come up. So I'm glad that we had that discussion so people in the diaspora will be educated as to as you said, the realities on the ground. But coming back to this whole Sioux issue, are you satisfied with the U.S. statement? Just saying that, accountability and rule of law is important in democratic societies. Under the APNU government, they were bold. The ambassador was out there attacking the government, saying that the government is not adhering to the rules of democracy, actually acting like if she was part of the PPP, right? People started calling her PPP Sarah. But now they have this nice, diplomatic language and so on. When clearly they could come out in their diplomatic, even if you use diplomatic language and say, there should be an investigation. They're not willing to say that. And that's why the embassy is perceived as an extension of the government.
And I am hopeful that it is their first salvo on this issue. I am hopeful that it is. But there remains a responsibility on our part to write to them, to bring it to their attention, and even ask for their assistance in facilitating an impartial investigation, because we have manifestly seen that does not lie within our capability at the moment because of just how compromised the police force and our investigative bodies are, as well as our institutions. And so for me, we will be seeking their assistance in investigating it because it has implications. Is it the Chinese alone? that have to take this course of action? What of American corporations who may be seeking to do business? They have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act that they must abide by. Can they then investigate to see whether or not there are instances that American businessmen who have sought to do business in Guyana have encountered this requirement of paying a consultation fee?
Well, that's important because that's against U.S. law. Now, let me ask you this. You see, they're calling it a consultation fee. If a government official, and both of you could answer this question, a government official whose commission is to provide services, if that person collects what's called a consultation fee, which is a bribe couched as a consultation fee, isn't that also inducement? Because you can't get consultation fee if you work for the government. So would that be law against the law?
If you are working for the government, for example, in the position of the vice president, you could.
It is a bribe.
Right.
It is an inducement at a bare minimum.
Right.
It is an inducement at a bare minimum.
So my question is, if it's described officially as a consultation fee, whether or not we could prove it's a bribe, can it be prosecuted?
You would have to have proof.
It's misconduct of
And
public
it is
office.
misconduct.
Okay.
At a bare
Exactly.
minimum.
That's where I wanted to go. Exactly.
Right? At a bare minimum, there is misconduct in public office.
Mhm.
You have a vice president who is guaranteeing support, whilst a third party that does not have a mandate from the people of Guyana or a contract with the people of Guyana is given all of the support. It is at least misconduct in public office, and it therefore,
Which the government just moved to make a life sentence.
okay, very good. And it is therefore important
Bharrat, you face a life sentence.
that it is seen as that. So you see, these are the discussions that we have to have. You know, people talk about, let me tell you something. There is absolutely a place for protest.
Well, the government
And
has
if
a
you
law
look-
protest.
If you look, people have the right to assemble, or the constitutional right to assemble. If you look at the protests and the pickets that have been happening, we must be sure that when you call for the protest, that the people are mobilized and agitated enough to show up in their numbers for a sustained period in order to gain the necessary impact. And that is the question that we have to have. It is easy to say protest, 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 but we must understand that the only way that I will get out there and stay out there is if I am passionate enough about this.
But one of the reasons too, even on the part of the opposition and the government, is that the Guyanese people are completely disengaged and they don't show interest. So even if the opposition calls for protests, some of them is showing up because the this, the that, the that. But at the Skank concert though, and they run into Patrice concert, it's something that really angers me. Then they're gonna jump up and say, it's what Biden doing, but it's government, and what the US doing, and what Burke doing, and what Norton doing. But the guy, how it is, Darren, we can get the younger generation and the people in these communities that you talk about, Jagdeo was this and Jagdeo. How could we get them? Some of them not even engaged. Some of them don't even know that Jagdeo is not president. They don't pay attention. They're disengaged. All they want is a handout for something, and they want to know how we can help them with this and that, rather than trying to see how they could be productive, civic-minded citizens.
Before you again, you see, education is imperative, right? And I don't want to go back to what the argument you had before.
Right.
Bharrat Jagdeo,
But the people also have a responsibility.
yes, Bharrat Jagdeo is a failed economist. Nothing that he has done has seen tremendous growth. For
Failed
Guyana.
leader, period.
The LCDS, no one really took it on except Norway. And the money was only accessed when under the David Reid led administration. Here is he going to community say, okay, we'll give you $40,000 of part-time jobs for 10 days a month. Our people, they'll be happy to get the $40,000, but that is not sustainable. A long-term benefit, our people cannot benefit from that. So we need now to tell our people, look, take what you get for now as you take what you get now. But this is something you cannot build a house with.
No, but hold on.
You cannot take care of family with.
That's the government's responsibility to provide people with services.
Yes, yes.
They're entitled to it.
Right. But this is what you're getting now. But you need to tell them, you need to let the people know. But this is not the way of life. This is not the right way. This $40,000 a month to give it to your business not sustainable. You can't take, you can't, when I go to buy groceries a month for my family, I feel bad. Because whilst I could afford it, more or less, I came from nothing, so I understand the struggles of society. So I go to pay $30,000 per week in groceries.
But isn't this in effect, both of you, a direct cash transfer to the people of Guyana that they're doing? And they said they were opposed to this.
No, that can't be direct cash transfer.
No, in effect.
No, because you're not work. Direct cash transfer is if we give you each Guyanese, regardless, we gave you a couple thousand US or so for $1,000 per month, that is it. But this part of $1,000 is nothing. It is nothing,
right,
compared to the suffering of our people. It could do nothing for them.
So
cash transfer, the purpose of cash transfer is to ensure those persons who are poor, those persons who cannot make it, to bring them up to a level where they could survive. You can't survive with $40,000.
Well, here, this is the point I'm trying to make. Bharrat, Jagdeo and the PPP and Orphan Alley, it's funny how we focus on him like if he's the president, because that's how he's presented himself. But they have been giving up COVID relief, flood relief. Now they're giving cane cutters or sugarcane workers $250,000, fishermen, all this money. And people don't see it as their entitlement as citizens of the country. They see it as excuse me, the PPP giving them money, right? Giving them assistance. And that's why some of them are like praising Bharrat, because that's how they present it. We're doing this. The coalition never did that for you. They're doing this. One of the things that I think the coalition political model in terms of education is to educate citizens about the responsibility of a government. Because to me, the PPP see every time they go in a Black community or a coalition community and they provide services, they see it as a favor. They're granting them a favor, right? They're not seeing it as services to the people of Guyana. That's your responsibility. That's your charge.
Before you know, I was embarrassed as a Black man. At the last, when you had the GDF party, Christmas party, everyone went there and say, you know, I am going to, wrapping up. I am going to, you have the double salary. And I see predominantly Black which jump up and cheer. Officers, people waiting to be educated. I was embarrassed by what I saw.
But it was taken away from them by the same government.
But when you, but when you look at it, if you give a double, I mean, look at your salary increase. Because of inflation, basically you're having less money now that you are getting on the APNU. So what the PPP could, we're going to starve you. We're going to starve you. Then we'll give you little pitons and then you're going to celebrate. Right. That is the PPP model. Right. And David Granger, while they were in government, they give proper increase. It was moved, the minimum wage was moved to about $30,000 to about $70,000, you know, significantly under the David Granger-led administration. But people they quickly forget.
All right, so let me ask Amanza to respond to that particular issue. I'm gonna follow up with a question, and then both of you will wrap up and then we close off. The David Granger, the point Darren is making is that the David Granger administration provided permanent, sustainable salary increases, not just a month's salary. So in effect, a salary increase of 50% or 30% would be sustainable throughout your career in that particular office, rather than just getting a month's increase, which is what the people is doing.
1 month pay.
1 month pay, exactly. But isn't it, again, the responsibility of the political leaders to educate the population so they could understand the difference? And that they're being duped?
Absolutely correct. There is no excuse for not having a machinery that will say to people, do not be fooled. And this is why programs such as these are important. Because you have a lot of people come, oh, hit the ground, boots on the ground, protest, rock up the place, and so on. That is not what builds a nation. Sure. While there is a place for that, there is an important place for education. So the Darren is absolutely correct. It's simple maths. If I give you a sustained increase that you get every month rather than a one-off, you are invariably better. Look at the 5Bs initiative. When you look at the fact that a single parent of 3 that had to send children to school every day ended up saving $30,000 a month because the children could go to school free, how does that stand up against a one-off $50,000 cash grant? And this is where I believe
When you're saving 30,000 multiplied by 12.
by 12. I believe that this is where not only the political leaders, but the community leaders
yes,
have a role to play. Political leaders have their role to play. And I always say this, 31 parliamentarians have a defined role. We have an advocacy role. We have to stand in parliament and make sure that for the record, certain things are entered into that Hansard, so that at any one time when you look back, you can see that there was advocacy, there was support. And then there has to be political action, which does not center around only the 31 MPs, but embraces political parties. It embraces the labor union. It embraces the civil society. Protesting about Quindon's murder has to go across the gamut. It's not only the political parties.
Right.
Civil society must be outraged about that. Churches must be outraged about that.
But the church leaders are compromised.
Labor must be outraged about that. Because it is in effect just backward. So we have to start having these all-embracing discussions. We have to step up our game in terms of some of the things that we must do, but we cannot ignore the fact that to overthrow any dictatorship requires a multifaceted approach that cannot be ignored. You got to have agitation, you have to have mobilization, you have to have approaches to the diplomatic community. It has to be an all hands on deck approach. The shooting down of each other, but you should do this and you should do that, will serve no useful purpose. What we must do is, if I am good at agitating the population, let me do that. If I am good at engaging the diplomatic community, let me do that. If I can speak to labor and get them involved, let me do that.
But that is what a political movement
That
entails.
is what a political movement is. And so this is why I will continue to speak. I will continue to use whatever forum we got available to make sure that our people understand that an informed population is what it takes to build a country. America did not get where it got because its citizens were uninformed of their rights, uninformed about proper policy, uninformed about proper economics. Y'all not perfect, but you have been doing this for 200 and something years. Guyana is yet 50 something.
56.
You understand? And so we have to make sure that our people and our population have the information so that they can make informed decisions and that our institutions work.
Great, that was your closing statement.
Yes, it was.
Darren, yours.
Well, back to our good friend. I would like to see a statement from the American embassy in Guyana saying that they will not engage with Jagdeo. Right. Anything strict is going to be with the Ifeanyi. But now I have no confidence in the Ifeanyi or anyone in the PVP to call out what was done. I see a post coming from purportedly from Neil Marks, who I believe is the routers point persons in Guyana and the first lady assistant. You know, so we see what is coming from that camp. So there's nothing good we could have.
And that is the garbage that he is sending for news to Reuters.
But you see, and that is too. I trust by now somebody from the opposition, someone will write to Reuters and say, look, this guy, there is a conflict because this guy here works closely with the First Lady of Guyana. So whatever narratives he wants to put out there or they want to put out there, going to go through him. So those are things that needs to be done.
Or the Press Association.
Or
the Press Association should condemn it.
They should. I see the president made a statement today, which I commend, Ms. Desir, where she identified how easy it was for Sue to take these purported investors, these investigating journalists, told Bharrat Jagdeo, I was able
He
to
would
see,
never do an interview with somebody from the Guyana.
no, in his home.
Yeah.
And I was able to enter his home. Like I was able to see Bharrat
You
Jagdeo.
believe that I was a terrorist? They just blew up the whole place or something. Could you believe that? He just allowed these people to just walk because of Sue?
Yeah, I see him walking into his home like, oh, man, do I have a seat?
Yeah, yeah. He was confident in Sue that he doesn't know. But he would just say, hi, good morning, sir. Anyway, it's my
Rickford, I wanted to just add that we want to have people stay tuned to the PNCR Facebook page. Usually there's an announcement because the leader and MPs are on the ground drive. They were in Essequibo, Dartmouth, Queenstown last weekend. And so stay tuned to see when the team is going to be coming to your neck of
your
the woods.
neighborhood.
So monitor the Facebook pages. It is not that we are not on the ground. We are. We absolutely are. And if you follow,
Publicize it a little more.
if you follow the
And when you
but you
guys,
see that the issue is access to the media.
right.
The issue is access to the media. That is another issue. And so what we have at our disposal right now is social media.
Right.
And so we're asking people to
Which they're trying to shut
monitor.
down.
Absolutely. We're asking people to monitor those so that you will be apprised of when the leader and the members of parliament will be in your respective communities. So
Great. All right. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for having us.
It's wonderful to have. This was such a nice discussion. Hopefully we could do it before you guys leave again. It's good to be with you guys in New York. But good that you guys joined us here in New York. We're accustomed to seeing each other on Zoom.
On Zoom.
And but they're here. We're here all together. So thanks a lot, and thank you guys for tuning in. I know a lot of you are on this live. I'm pretty sure about 14,000 people of you are. We'll see after we close up. But thank you guys a lot. Just on the screen, I'm looking at one page. We're streaming on like 5 pages. I'm seeing 1,400 of you. Thanks a lot for joining me. I'll see you again for conversation with Rickford Burke, probably on Thursday and then Sunday. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Be safe. Thanks again for joining us. And y'all keep looking for Sue.
Who's Sue?